Our speaker today is George Ayoub, an adjunct professor at Hastings College. Mr. Ayoub's topic is navigating the disinformation superhighway. George Ayoub filed nearly 5,000 columns, editorials, and features in 21 years as a journalist for the Grand Island Daily Independent. His columns also appeared in the Omaha World Herald and the Kearney Hub. His work has been recognized by the Nebraska Press Association and the Associated Press, and I should say now he contributes to the Nebraska Examiner as well. He was awarded a national prize by Gatehouse Media for a 34-part series focusing on the impact of cancer on families of victims and survivors. For the past 18 months, he has been a weekly contributor to the commentary section of Nebraska Examiner and online nonprofit newspaper. He's a member of the adjunct faculty and academic support staff at Hastings College. He's also the author of 2 short novels, Warm for Christmas and Dust in Grissom. In 2019, he published Confluence, the biography of former Omaha World Herald publisher and CEO John Goschak. It's our pleasure to have him with us today. Please help me welcome George Ayoub.
Well, thank you, Larry, and thank you for asking me to come and share with you today. I'm cheating a little bit. This is a condensed version of a 6-week OLLI class that I taught last summer. So in 30 minutes, it's going to be very condensed. I could probably just show you this slide and call it good when it comes to disinformation. But let me tell you how I came to be interested in this topic. So I've been actually I've been a working journalist I'm in my 4th decade, and for a long time I was a columnist at the Independent. And my columns, as Larry said, ran in other newspapers. And with the advent of the internet, actually my column, I used to tell my mom, who was my biggest fan, well, my column runs all over the world, you know. And I noticed as I moved towards retirement, I retired from that in 2015. When you're a newspaper columnist, especially when you write personal columns, I mean, I wrote about the events of the day, about politics. I wrote a lot about education. But I also wrote about my family, raising my son, things like that. And so when you do that and your name and picture appears in the paper 4 or 5 times a week, people really think they know you. And in some ways they do. They do. And so because I had this sort of see at the breakfast table, we were a morning paper, see at the breakfast table relationship with people, they felt it was, oftentimes they would pick up the phone and call me and want to talk. And sometimes they call and tell me they thought I was stupid, but most of the time they just wanted to talk. And so this happened over the course of, I started writing columns in 1994. So this is after 21 years. And I noticed something in the last 3 or 4 years. And what I noticed was in our conversations with readers, they had really bad information. And worse, they were acting on bad information. And I would have conversations with them about where they got this information. And oftentimes the usual suspect, the internet, but social media, which coincided with the time I was a newspaper columnist, and it grew and it grew and it grew. The Independent was one of the first newspapers that had an active website. And so I had embraced the internet and social media and so on. And I had a Twitter account and a Facebook account, which was required as a journalist, at least at the Independent. But I grew concerned about this lack of information, and I was more concerned about where they were getting their information, and it was primarily social media. And so eventually I retired, and as my biography said, I wrote some books, but this topic really, I could see it happening all the time. I could see it happening in news reports. I could see it happening in conversations with people. And so I started doing some reading, and I read some books. I did some research, and I found that it was worse than I thought. It was worse than I thought. About that time, I was doing some adjunct work for Doan. And so I developed a course on misinformation. And that course, as you know, during the pandemic, if you developed a course and then tried to teach it during the pandemic, it didn't work very well. So anyway, I had this entire course put together. And so I got a hold of Bob and I taught the entire course last summer for Ollie. So that's how I came to understand and recognize this idea that we have misinformation. We have a difficult time talking to each other because we can't agree on the facts. You know, the term alternative facts, which I mock every chance I get, it's frightening that we even have that term, but it's difficult for us to operate, particularly in a democracy, if we can't agree on some objective truths, some objective principles, and who we are as a nation and how we operate, how we do those things. So, in a political sense, it's incredibly important. But I teach first-year students at Hastings, and it's remarkable that this is not a problem in any particular age group. It seems to be across an entire scope of society. So anyway, so today I'm going to, in my Ollie class, we talked about what's the problem? What's it look like? Why do we do these things? And then at the end, I have a toolkit to keep you safe from the misinformers who are out there. So this is the language and psychology of disinformation. That was the name of the course that I taught for Ollie. So I always like to look to people who are smarter than me, and that's a lot of people. But these are some things that I think that have helped me understand what we're up against here with misinformation. So you can look through those, but I'm just summarizing. Cass Sunstein is talking about, we have a tendency as people, when we get together and discuss things, we go to extremes. It seems to be part of our nature. And that has been around for a long time. Now we're acting on those extremes. And so that has become an issue. The second thing, when we have misinformation, that vacuum is filled up. That vacuum is filled up. When, for example, so oftentimes as a journalist, you would, if the bank was robbed and you call up the police department or the bank and they would say no comment. Well, first of all, no comment is a comment. But second of all, you know what happens at the coffee shop down the street from the bank that was just robbed? That information, I mean, whoosh, they got it all figured out. They got it all figured out. So the truth, the information keeps that vacuum from being filled with bad information. But what's happened with social media in particular is that we have this continual churn. We have this continual churn of information. And once it gets in the bloodstream, as maybe you've experienced, it's hard to get out. Propaganda has been around forever. It's a technique. It's used in all kinds of marketing and advertising and when we want to persuade people. But I really like this thing about, if there are any historians in the room, I had never seen this, that history becomes lies agreed upon, and so misinformation is always been around. It's not a new thing. If you're uninformed, it's your choice. If you're misinformed, it's their choice. That's a tenet of this as well. And then the most frightening thing from Voltaire is that once I can convince you of something truly absurd, I can get you to do some really terrible things. And I think we don't have to look very far in our recent past to see that's happened. So some good thoughts. So what is the cost of misinformation? So I got this information through some books that I've read. And if you think about a business and they're dealing with misinformation. So for example, the boss is suggesting that everybody get a vaccine, a COVID vaccine. Okay. So there's a lot of misinformation out there. So if you think about what happens in any, it could be a business, could be in any enterprise. The first thing is that you have this escalation cost, and the escalation cost, it requires you to, the escalation cost requires you to deal with this information, whether it's true or not. So then you have to ramp up what you do. And every time you ramp up what you do to deal with misinformation, you are not doing what you're set out to do. If you're there to make widgets, but you have to deal with this other piece of misinformation. So whole departments in both business and elsewhere deal with this type of thing. And what happens is that we, as I said earlier about alternative facts, what happens when misinformation is out there is it generates various versions of the truth. So who's going to decide what the truth is down at the docks when we're supposed to get COVID shots? So you can see that you have to pay attention to those things. You have to pay attention. Then the second thing you have to do is you have to start verifying, well, what is it true? So then you take workers, you take people whose job it is to make widgets, and you have to give them other things to do. That suffers, the production line suffers, and you have to begin to hire people who analyze this information, whether it's true or not. And then you have the third problem, and that is the false positive. You know, you want to be credible, certainly, but if you look at the next step, you don't want to have a false negative. So the false positive, the example would be if you close down your business because there's a rumor of a shooting in the area, but it's bad information. Okay. If you don't close down and it is a shooting, how do you decide? And we are in a position now that we're not sure. I'll tell you a quick little story. I was a teammate for a long time, and my teammate was a senior. This was at Grand Island Senior High School, and it was in the spring, and we were meeting in the library, and we got an announcement. It was a code, I think it was black, code red, black, I forget it. Anyway, I didn't know what that was, but he told me, he said, that's shelter in place. They turned out all the lights. And my thought was, well, it's a false positive. I mean, that can't be happening, can it? You know? Well, we hid, and we were there for a half an hour. The young man said to me, I don't want to die. It was a terrible, terrible feeling. You know, I texted my wife and son. I just said, if you hear, I'm okay and everything. Well, come to find out, there was an active threat against the school from two armed people. They never made it to the school. They were intercepted and so on. But the fact is that I reacted one way and my teammate reacted a different way. And I really thought to myself, you know, I'm stuck in one of these. I'm stuck in that false positive. You gotta show me. You gotta show me. And what the danger of that could have been. So false positives and false negatives, we have to deal with them all the time. Then you have to communicate to your employees what's going on. All that becomes an issue. All that takes time and takes energy. And finally, what happens is that it creates tremendous stress among people. So that's kind of a business thing. I'll go back. I want to go back a slide. So $78 billion a year is what it costs. It's what costs businesses and enterprises to do all those things, 78 billion. Plus, I added death. Bad information about COVID vaccines killed people. The numbers are not, and the research is not really clear, but it's around, the best I can, from a number of sources, 400,000 people needlessly died. That's a big number. That's a big number. So when somebody says, well, it's just, you know, people making up lies and other people believe in them. No, there's a tremendous cost. There's a tremendous cost, not only to our systems, but to individuals as well. And when I was first worried back there, but when I was getting ready to retire, I had no idea that how bad that was. So I don't know if you know the story about Comet Ping Pong Pizza, but this is the place where people were taking children killing them and drinking their blood. You all know that story. That was the story that was posted on the internet. It got legs. It went all over the internet. It went all over social media. And true believers became really true believers. And one of them packed up an automatic weapon and went to Comet Ping Pong Pizza and started shooting because he was sure that there was a ring in the basement killing children and drinking their blood. And when you think about that, you think, well, that's just outlandish. I mean, who would believe that? And why would they do that? But that, if you go out on the internet, still there. Still there. It's in the bloodstream and it's not going anywhere. It's still there. One of the slides I have talks about the backfire effect, is that facts don't seem to matter. And if you go to the symposium in October, I'm sure one of the speakers is going to talk. Facts don't seem to matter when you're dealing with conspiracy theories. In fact, the facts oftentimes create even stronger feelings about the conspiracy theory. So anyway, that was, people just rung, oh my God, what are we thinking? What are we doing? Yeah, and that was my question. So what are we doing about this? I mean, in a country where we want to be able to speak freely, what is the consequence and how do we deal with that? So at one point I thought we were getting better. Comet Pizza was it was like 2015. It was before the 2016 election. Because Hillary Clinton was leading the blood drinking crew in the basement of the pizza. So we got better in 2020, according to some research by some Stanford economists. We didn't visit these bad websites as much as we did in 2016, but you kind of have to put that in perspective, and that's what I have inside the box. Even though we did better, 68 million Americans visited shaky websites 1.5 billion times, 1.5 billion times. And that's right before the election. So they're wondering about what's going to happen in 2024. Are we going to do better? Are we going to do worse? So as voters, where do we get our information? We're not the demographic, but if you look at this, people under 30 don't get it where we get it. It's all online. It's all Twitter or social media. So one of the phenomenons that we have to deal with is called the illusory truth effect. And this is the psychology of when something is produced, is shown, is heard over and over and over again. There's a sense that it becomes true in our minds, even though we know the very first time we hear it, it is not true. And if you think about the reason or how people make money online is that they don't really care about the truth. They care about likes, and if you're pushing the button, they don't care. They're making money if you're pushing the button. So truth, first of all, you don't get it very often, but the illusory truth effect is this thing that it's constant. It's constant. And we see that in other ways. I mean, most of you live in Lincoln. I paid attention to the Lincoln mayoral race, with those continual ads working on me, working on me, working on me, working on everyone. That was the idea. And that's a sense of propaganda as well. But the illusory truth effect is perfect for if you are in the business of attention. And that's what the internet is in the business. They want your attention and they want to keep your attention. And that's why I get messages on my phone, on my iPad, on my watch, because they want to keep my attention. In a book, which I have a recommendation of some books at the end here. It's called Stolen Focus by Johan Hari. Wonderful book. Talks about how we have become, our focus is so diffused because we are continually interrupted. The psychology and the research shows that once I'm interrupted in a task, let's say I'm writing a commentary and I get interrupted, my phone goes off. for me to get back, I think it was 15 minutes for me to get back to where I was before the phone went off. But if the phone goes off continually, so I've lost my focus. I highly recommend Stolen Focus. Then there's the Dunning-Kruger effect. I'm sure many of you are familiar with this. This is when, well, I love the little cartoon over here. Incompetent people are too incompetent to realize they're incompetent, you know? So the internet has made us all geniuses, right? One of the things I have encountered in my line of work, which is because I write opinion, is people who don't agree with my opinion. And oftentimes they say, do the research. You know, and I say, okay, where would I go? And, you know, Wikipedia is not research. Neither is Google, really, for that matter. I mean, maybe it's a first step. I don't know. And so in Ollie this summer, we talked a lot about peer review, and it kind of go back to your college courses. I mean, where do you get your information? But just because it's on the internet doesn't make it true, you know. What I say to my first year students is, this is Ayoub's corollary. If 1,000 people say a stupid thing, it's still a stupid thing. So the Dunning-Kruger effect it's a two-pronged problem. First of all, it exists. And the people that can't practice metacognition, they can't learn from their experiences, or more particularly their mistakes. But then people act on that information. They act on that information. I used to work for someone who was a real estate genius. He wasn't in real estate. He had never sold a home for someone else other than you know, he had a real estate agent, but he knew all about real estate. And I always think of him when I think of Dunning-Kruger, because he was, you know, he was fairly competent in many areas, but real estate didn't seem like it, but he thought he was. On the internet, I don't know if I still have this. I got to show you this one. I'm going. Here it is. On the internet, nobody knows you're a dog. This is my favorite cartoon of all time. Right? Because on the internet, I'm a genius. Dunning-Kruger be damned. I am a genius because I have the internet. So one of the things that is a serious issue there is that Dunning-Kruger produces what we call low information voters. And they don't have a lot of information, or they have a lot of information and it's not very accurate. And when that happens, it really does not, it's not a real reflection of, it doesn't really reflect how we actually feel about the issues of the day. So Dunning-Kruger is a big thing. Confirmation bias is the big one, and we all know about that. And one of the things I have my students in college do is do an information audit. I have them list where they got all their information the previous day. You know, organized enterprises that their job is to produce information is always way down the list. It's way down the list. Friends, Instagram, TikTok, big. Yeah. If you want to know what's going on in the world, get a TikTok account, right? So, and of course, you know, the problem with confirmation bias I found is that it creates what another slide here is going to show. It creates this kind of bubble that I live in, and I don't ever hear what other people are thinking about. When I got on Twitter, you know, I started following people, and I thought, well, I'll follow this person because I agree with this person. And a friend of mine who is a journalist in California said that he picks out 10 people that he cannot stand what they believe in, and he follows them. And I said, well, I'm going to do that. I could only go to 5. And that's down to 3 right now. So, but it's been helpful to me because then I hear the other side of the story, and it helps me in my own metacognition. It helps me kind of understand what other people are thinking, for a writer, for a journalist, it's valuable to really know what other people are thinking, and more importantly, where they're getting their information. So confirmation bias is a real key to people who traffic and misinformation. And then there's cognitive dissonance, which is kind of a result. Cognitive dissonance kind of creates chaos. I've listed some of the symptoms over here on the side. And because of that chaos, I mean, that's often what we see in online interactions is this chaos. I had a Facebook account, but I had to get off. I was getting hacked all the time. And when your name's in public a lot, that happens, but I was getting hacked. But I mean, for me, and I'm not, if you have a Facebook account, God bless you, but it served no purpose for me. It really did. And I didn't really ever post. I was kind of a lurker. But I saw a lot of cognitive dissonance on there, one of the real phenomenons, and this is a serious issue, but if somebody doxes somebody online, there is this tremendous rush to join the fray. And it really has, I mean, people have committed suicide over this. And it's really a serious issue. And I get the idea of Facebook and I get the idea of social media. We can develop communities, and I think it's wonderful for that. It's wonderful to develop those communities. But this other idea of interacting with people I really don't know and then agreeing with them on something that I don't know anything about, or a person I know, I think it becomes kind of frightening. So I got off Facebook. If you want to know how to get off Facebook, it takes 6 weeks. And but I did it. I hung in there. I figure Zuckerberg has enough money. Here's the backfire effect. And a Pew Research published, this is before the 2016 election, some really landmark research that was like, oh my God, this really happens? Where they found that people, when presented with information that refutes their beliefs and what they acted on in their beliefs, they doubled down. They were presented the facts, they doubled down. Well, God bless them, because I see that happening in Congress all the time. What? They're doubling down. Why they do that for political reasons, that's a whole nother story. But the fact is, this information, accurate, factual information, when it doesn't change minds, we are going to have a difficult time interacting. We are going to have a difficult time having a discussion, but think of the difficulties we're going to have writing policy, making decisions when we can't agree on the facts, Huge issue. If you follow the Nebraska legislature, I see Charlene spoke to you a little, was that a while back, or yeah, she spoke to you about legislative issues. If you follow the Nebraska legislature, I saw a lot of this. I wrote about it. Boy, I tell you, that is, sometimes I feel bad. It's so easy because they just lead with their chin for a journalist who's looking for something. But I see a lot of this, and if I had a discussion, I would want to know where'd they get their information. Was it information that they found, that they did their own research, or did they get their information from somebody in the party, somebody outside Nebraska, other kinds of things? So backfire effect, it's real and it happens all the time. A deep fake is, Albert, I think we're just going to skip the video, but a deep fake is really, it's an AI generated. It can put my face on Larry's body, and it's incredible what they can do with this. What it leads you, and the video, there's a video to this, but essentially what the video says is, well, I don't really agree with what the video says, because they say it's not that big a problem. But I think deep fakes in combination with AI, the new advances in AI, it is a problem. Because eventually I'm going to click on the electronic Google machine and going to get something, and I'm going to go, is any of this real or true, and who's putting it out? It's difficult. It's difficult when you're in an academic setting, because you're trying to find some truth and you're trying to point your students in that direction. And it's hard. I've had to meet the AI thing head on because I teach rhetoric, and they can just put it in Chat GPT and takes them 3 minutes and good to go. I don't think they've done it yet. I've been looking, but I don't think they've done it yet. But if they do, what am I going to do? Here's the news silo. This happened, this was a phenomenon that really happened in the 90s with talk radio. People could find people that agreed with them. And so they tuned into the talk radio show that agreed with them. And it said, you know, so you might have the most outlandish idea, but if you find somebody to agree with you, it's not so outlandish. Yeah, we all think this. We all believe this. So we are in these silos. And what happens in the silos is there's kind of a power struggle, but then the person who emerges at the top and is feeding that information has tremendous control. At the symposium, they're going to talk a lot about conspiracy theories, and there's a real sense of mind control when you get to that sort of thing. And when you're in a silo, you don't hear anything else. You just hear that. Okay, so conspiracy theories, you know, we got a million of them. We got a million of them. How you deal with them is probably as important as recognizing that is a conspiracy theory. We like them because they're kind of fun and juicy, and oh my God, do you think that could have really happened? You know, there were 2 shooters on the grassy knoll. You know, that's our generation's conspiracy theory. As I said earlier, if someone believes in a conspiracy theory, extracting them from that theory is not an easy thing. I've tried, I've failed. And so I'm going to talk a little bit here in a couple minutes about what a toolkit for you to use to deal with people that use conspiracy theories. So I work with some people, and I've encountered some students who believe in serious conspiracy theories, you know, and I don't, you know, I've come to a place, maybe it's just my age, but I've come to a place where I'm not going to engage because I know it's useless. I am really lucky though. I have a voice once a week to address those issues, but one-on-one, I don't because if we can't agree on the facts, I don't know how we can have a discussion. That's part of the thing. But also the conspiracy theories are really intricate, and they're a rabbit hole that you can go down and you know, if you do the research, you're never coming back on a conspiracy theory because it just keeps going and going and going. If you look at conspiracy theories, and I'm sure the speakers in the symposium will go further into this, but if you look at conspiracy theories, they are intricate, and there are many ways to prove each step along the way. It might not be true, but there's many ways to prove it according to what they find when they do, quote, their research as well. So sometimes the conspiracy theories are out in the open, and they're right there. In the 50s, when Big Tobacco realized that their product was killing people, you know, they decided that they would sow doubt. That was what became known as the tobacco strategy. And the strategy was, and it has like 107 points if you look at it. And that sense of propaganda challenged the science, which was clear. It challenged the science, and it put doubt in people's minds, particularly people who smoked. And a lot of people smoked in the 50s. I mean, it was, you know, if you look at movies, old black and white movies from the 50s, smoking's a thing. You know, we do that. So the tobacco strategy became known as this way that you question the science, you question the motives, and there's a whole series of things that we do. I think it was yesterday or the day before, I lived in California for 10 years in Los Angeles. There's a group of Californians who are now suing Big Oil. And their suit will, and Big Oil had a response, like a press release response, and it was right out of this playbook. You know, well, is the science exact? What are your motives? It was the same thing. So this is misinformation, disinformation. I use those terms interchangeably, but this is misinformation in a real fine line between the truth and not the truth. The tobacco strategy's only role there is to create doubt. And if there's doubt, then maybe it's not true. And that's where they want us to go. That's where they want us to go. Okay, so here we are at AI. We can't talk about AI without talking about all the pluses of AI. There's many wonderful things that AI does. And it's kind of revolutionizing some of those things with human error. And I don't know how much you've used something like ChatGPT. I've done it a lot just to be familiar with it. But these are some things that you might want to consider when you talk about progress in artificial intelligence. I see AI-enabled digital assistants is so important. I put it on there twice. Yeah. I have a friend. She's since passed away, but she was a radiologist. And if you think about if you have 50 cases and you want to go to work the next day and deal with those cases in the order in which they should be dealt with based on what she saw the day before, AI can do that. That's incredible, you know. But it can also write my students' essays, and I don't know what that's going to do for them, particularly at the credit hour cost that they're paying at Hastings College. So artificial intelligence has some issues, and on the right, I put what some of those issues are. It will take jobs away from people. It'll be able to do things. It will make mistakes. It will make mistakes. Depending on how you're using it, those mistakes could be serious. All right. And I thought this one was really important because leaders in the tech field really see the difficulties ahead if we don't think about the technology of artificial intelligence. Once again, the technology has outpaced our ability to think about it. However, in ChatGPT, which comes from OpenAI, ChatGPT works because it guesses the next right word. But Bard, which is coming from Google, works in a different way. It thinks. And when it thinks, it can make decisions. And if it can make decisions, it might make decisions we don't want it to make. So how are we going to deal with that possibility? So I don't wish. I mean, I love it that I can tell Siri to order me coffee and then go to Starbucks and my coffee's there. You know, I love that. But it's going to change the landscape of so much of what we do and so much of what we consume that what they're saying there at the bottom of the page, getting a handle on, is going to be really important issue. Okay, so I'm going to go quickly here because I'm running out of time. Some ideas about skepticism. A journalist, we're kind of built in skepticism. You should have some. You know, I often say, wow, that's a great story. Is any of it true? You know, that. So what I put together for my friends in Ollie is a starter kit to deal with disinformation. And this is what I would suggest. You can do this individually, or I think, you know, institutions can do this. So fact-checking sites are important. Find some that you believe in. Your slow thinker is, I got from Daniel Kahneman's book, Thinking Fast and Slow. Do some real research if you really want to know. Recognize lapses in logic and develop a posse of positive skeptics. And there's my friends the dogs. So here are some, these are the ones I use. I mean, I'm sure there's others. PolitiFact is really a good one. The Poynter Institute's kind of the gold standard for journalists. And so PolitiFact, I went to a Poynter Institute conference a couple of years in a row, and so I got familiar with PolitiFact. Factcheck.org, I use this a lot. It's again from the Annenberg Public Policy Center, which, you know, a tremendous group there. They do a lot of, like PolitiFact, they do a lot of political stuff, but they also One of the things I like that they do is they check political ads. What's the truth about those? Black check is sort of a newer one. This talks about the logic of people's points. Open secrets, follow the money. If you follow the money, you're going to get the answer. Open Secrets does that. That's from the Center for Responsive Politics, which is a great resource. And then Snopes, which has been around for years. I mean, that started as a debunking urban legends. I started my Ollie class telling that my son was at a conference in New Orleans and the person next door had their kidney removed in the middle of the night and they took him away, and God, everybody was aghast. I said, isn't that something? And they said, yeah. I said, well, I made the whole thing up. On the first day of the class, you're taking a chance when you say that. So that was the last time I lied to them. And then this one I just started to use a little bit. This goes through news stories I think they take it every 3 days and then they post and then they check the worst offenders. There's lots of offenders. One of the things I just have to say as a member of the media is that the media is complicit often in repeating incorrect information or rumors. If the story starts out, well, there's a rumor about, and my wife does not like to watch the news with me because I say, why are you reporting on a rumor? It's a rumor, She said, why don't you go watch in the other room? And she's a smart person too. So anyway, this is pretty good. Okay, so here's Cannon's book. It's on my recommended list as well. But these are some things that you can do when you're reacting to bad information. And oftentimes, often I put this list together kind of based on some things about how to deal with emails, because phishing emails are one of the primary culprits in disseminating misinformation. All right. I get hundreds of emails every day, and I would say 98% of them I didn't ask for. And it's hard to keep up with which unsubscribing. I think sometimes when you unsubscribe, I think they send your name to somebody else. So the next time you unsubscribe and say, and don't send my name to the guy down the street. So there's a number of things, check for typos, check when they sent the email. If the email is sent in the middle of the night, I'm not going there. Anytime there's a typo, I wouldn't do it. Too good to be true. The content of the email is important. I had a conversation with somebody that called me on the way down here, and her mother is a writer and got an email from what she thought was a reasonable source. And so we talked about, what was in it, what was said, when was it sent, sounded okay. And then the source of the email. I don't know about you, but I do not answer the phone unless I know the number, because spoofers who spoof your number, so I see that all the time. I get a numbers from Grand Island, and I used to answer it and it was, it's telling me something, but I don't do it anymore. So people will say, hey, I called you. And I said, well, you're going to have to do something else. This is a big one. And this is because we're so busy. We're so busy. The scammers and the people that want to disinform you want you to speed up. They want you to speed up. They want you to go through your emails quickly. They want you to go through your texts quickly. Somebody sends you a text and you might recognize the name, you might not. Check this video out. It's really cool. Okay. They got you. All right. So slow down. And then, I have a posse of skeptics. These are people that I know. Two of my posse of 5, 2 of them are journalists, ex-journalists, actually. And if I really want to know about something, I'll call and say, hey, do you know about such and such? And it's good to develop that. And then if I'm unsure, I delete it, and think before you link is kind of that's from the courtesy of the IT department at Hastings College. We had 2 incidents this summer, and we've all had to change our passwords. And I mean, it was a whole thing because somebody got in, and if you think about it, the information in a college, what is available to, people who want to do bad things, it's scary. Okay, so and I've answered the engagement question, and that's certainly a question for each individual to decide about. So if I'm talking over the backyard fence about who I'm going to vote for, that's fine. I can have those discussions, but I get out of the discussion when somebody says, a little green person came and told me who to vote for. I'm out. That might be an extreme example. The thing is that, I just don't want to engage in that because I can't connect to that. And I also think that engaging online, oh my God, I used to, Leonard Pitts, who's since retired, is my favorite columnist. I love this guy. And he would engage, and he was wonderful. He would just knock the socks off these people, but he kind of lost steam, I think, towards the end because it's an ongoing thing. I don't engage. I wrote a piece for the Examiner about a Supreme Court decision about prayer before a football game. And I questioned a couple things about the decision and why the court would do that. And so I got a call from my editor, and she said, this guy on the radio in Omaha wants to interview you. And she said, and I said, okay. And she said, anyway, so she counseled me that this person didn't always deal with the facts. And I said, okay, I'm out. I'm out. So, I mean, I'm more than willing to defend what I write, but if we can have a reasonable fact-based conversation about it, that's fine. So this is my list of books that I would recommend to you. Stolen Focus we talked about. This is why our devices have us. And when there's no going back. I mean, I got off Facebook, but I still have an iPad and a phone and a watch. The Death of Expertise by Tom Nichols. He's one of the people I follow that I don't agree with all the time. Really excellent book. Talks about why, because primarily of the internet, everybody's an expert. They don't need experts anymore. And he has a whole bunch of stuff about they don't need college professors anymore. Because I know, because I have Google. There's some books here that I read a long time ago, but I refer to, and one of them is Amusing Ourselves to Death by Neil Postman. Wonderful read. Really forecasted what's happening with us now. The Constitution of Knowledge is a really good read about politics and government and what's going on. Merchant of Doubt, I explained that. The Misinformation Age is one of the first books I read. A lot of science there about how we make decisions, how we spread information among ourselves. And then Post-Truth is written by Lee McIntyre. He is at MIT, and post-truth is when feelings become more important than facts. That's the world in which we live in now. So we all have, there's a big cost to being misinformed. It's up to each individual person, in my opinion, to not be misinformed and to challenge the misinformation.